Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Joyce Joyce has entered the conversation to be a possible late replacement for Derek Chisora for October the 26th. As we know, Joseph Parker has pulled out through illness and apparent spider bite. Eddie Hearn, the promoter for the show, is looking around. What are the options? He's named a number of names, some of which are out of the mix now, and I'll get to that a bit later. But Joyce Joyce is a new name that Eddie Hearn has thrown into the mix in an interview with IFL TV. So speaking to IFL TV, he said he might make an offer to Joyce Joyce. He said he hadn't spoken to Sam Jones when asked, but he said Joyce could be a possible opponent for Derek Chisora. And he said by Sunday in the United Kingdom, he expects he will be able to announce an opponent for October the 26th for Chisora. And obviously he was asked about, well, what if you can't find anyone suitable? And he sort of said, well, look, we might have to look at taking it off pay-per-view, but he was confident he would be able to get a good name. So I'll get to those names later that are still in the mix. But the Joyce option first is, I think this is something that there's a couple of things to throw around here. I mean, one, is it viable? Two, is it good enough? And also, three, what does this mean for Joyce Joyce in terms of his career, the way that he's now perceived? In terms of, is it achievable? I'm not sure, because he's obviously promoted by Frank Warren. How many favors is Frank Warren going to do? But we don't know all the ins and outs of whatever his deal is with Frank Warren. Is there some sort of ins and outs? Because I believe it's still a co-promotional deal, and the other part of that equation is Ringstar. So maybe there is some leeway for Joyce Joyce to actually fight Derek Chisora. I don't know. And if you go back just a year or so, this was a fight that Derek Chisora's current promoter, David Hay, was chasing for Joyce Joyce when he promoted Joyce. They were actively chasing Derek Chisora, and there was a couple of moments where it looked like it might get over the line, but Derek Chisora seemingly didn't really want the fight, seemingly moving the goalposts on money and all sorts of other bits and pieces. And it's not that I think that he's scared of Joyce Joyce, but at that point in time, Joyce, had a handful of fights, didn't really seem to offer much in the way to Derek Chisora. But now he's got about 10 fights on his resume. He's the WBA Gold Champion. His profile has expanded. He's just had a good contender level win against Bryant Jennings, so his profile is obviously up. And he's a name in the United Kingdom, obviously a silver medalist from the Olympics, so he's not without some profile. And let's face it, they need a bit of profile for a fight for Derek Chisora to ensure that this is going to be a pay-per-view worthy event. Obviously, Parker and Chisora, that was going to be a good fight. So Joyce and Chisora might not quite be of the same level, but it's not too far off. And I think with Joyce being obviously a UK fighter too, he's got some profile, and there could be something on the line in terms of Joyce's WBA gold title. So I actually quite like the fight. I think that'd be quite a good one. And in terms of Joyce's progression, that's sort of something that he's been looking for a while, that sort of level of fight. And in terms of coming off that Bryant Jennings win, if they could get that fight, that's a pretty decent fight for Joyce Joyce. And for Derek Chisora, it'd be a good scrap, a good challenge. But then again, does he want to go in against Joyce Joyce only at 3 weeks' notice? I don't know. But in terms of social media, Sam Jones has on his Twitter, in response to the interview, which says we could make Chisora Joyce, Sam Jones has just put the phone emoji. And in another tweet, he says, anyone know a good place to buy a table-proof crash helmet? Asking for a friend, with the thumbs up. And I guess with some of these sorts of tweets by Jones, it could just be him, as people have alluded to in the comments. Is it teasing, or is it actually something that could happen? And I guess there's a few questions around the sort of ins and outs of Joyce's promotional status. In terms of Joyce's career, great fight for him, I believe. Even at 3 weeks' notice, I mean, we know he stays in shape between fights. It's not a bad fight for him. But maybe this is an opportunity, with his name being thrown out there by Eddie Hearn, where Sam Jones, doing what a good hype man should, is just making the most of it in terms of, bubbling up a little bit more media and publicity as a result of the things that he's saying, indicating that they could be willing to take that fight. And getting back to a question that I raised earlier, is it a good enough fight? I think this probably does sort of meet that bar. I think there would be quite a bit of interest for Joe Joyce versus Derek Chisora. I mean, probably just as much interest as a Michael Hunter fight. I don't know how big Michael Hunter's profile is. I think for hardcore boxing fans, definitely held in a certain regard, but with casual fans, maybe not so much. Maybe there is more casual awareness in the United Kingdom market for Joe Joyce, who was an Olympian, who would have had a lot of airtime in the past, and some people have been following his journey. So yeah, I think Joe Joyce would sort of tick quite a few boxes, and Eddie Hearn has really sort of said, look, we need to nail someone down, and pretty good. And of the options that he was talking about, previously he'd named a number of names, 6 names, but he'd also sort of thrown in Hrgovic and Price. But of the latest interview, he gave an update and said Alexander Povetkin probably wouldn't be him. He likes to have a regimented sort of build-up. He said Hunter is definitely still in the mix, as is Price. He said Oscar Rivas is still there. He also said Char, but Char's already ruled himself out. So, yeah, I don't know why his name is still there. And he said Wallen, he would doubt that because Derek Chisora maybe wouldn't want to face another southpaw. But Wallen's co-manager David Berlin just a day or so ago said that they're looking to rest Otto Wallen for the rest of the year anyway. So some of the names might be just thrown out there to make it look like there is some potential options out there where in reality it might be a smaller pool of fighters. And at the moment, I think of those names, probably Michael Hunter would seemingly be the favourite, and that would tick a lot of the boxes. I think Oscar Rivas potentially too, but the thing is with Rivas, Eddie Hearn does not promote Rivas, so it could be a more remote possibility. Hunter has expressed an interest in being Chisora's opponent, whereas we haven't really heard hide nor hair from Oscar Rivas. David Price, I still think he's going to box on that November 23rd card in Liverpool. I don't think he's going to take that at 3 weeks' notice, but it's interesting that Joyce has joined the mix here. Is it possible? Maybe it's not, but it sort of would be a good sort of way to close off that loop between Chisora and Joyce, because under Hay, they were chasing Chisora like crazy trying to get that fight, and now Hay is promoting Chisora, and it'd sort of be a bit serendipitous if it ended up being Joyce facing Chisora under his old promoter David Hay. That would be quite funny, but I like that fight if they could make it. How possible it is, I'm unsure, because if Frank Warren has obviously more control and can sort of veto that, then maybe it's dead in the water even before it begins. And I think many of us would suspect that may be the case, but we don't know all the ins and outs of his deal with Frank Warren. We'll have to see where this goes. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.